Alright, so this is the Atlas class heavy cruiser, which is a project I've been working on for about the last 3 weeks, and now I have finally finished. Now, this is a heavy cruiser. It is a step up from the Centurion, which is a medium cruiser, and this is part of my Olympic class project, which basically just means I take an idea and I push it to the absolute extreme to make it as dedicated to that idea as I possibly can. Now, what this means is for a heavy cruiser, is that I gave it a massive split battery for a very heavy and medium grade weapons, as well as a heavy battery of missiles, point defense, and screening weapons. Now, this ship is approximately 1 kilometer long and probably close to 500 meters wide. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. So why don't we start from the front. Now this is going to be a bit laggy and I have to overclock my computer for it to handle this. So I apologize, it's going to be a bit framey at points. So while I'm on my way to the front here, it's just going to take a bit of time. I'm going to highlight the weaponry that this ship possesses. Those big turrets with the triple cannons are 600mm triple cannons, and there are 110 of those spread across the ship. Then there are 92 of the smaller 480mm twin turrets, 48 quasar shot cannons versus the secondary twin turret that's a little bit lower. We have 36 long sword. The names are too similar for me. Missile turrets. We have over 1,000 longbow missile tubes and close to 2,000 flechette launchers, as well as an array of several hundred different point defense weapons, including these little interceptor rockets that you can see right there. We have Oculus point defense lasers, as well as Cord smart guns, which are meant to take out fighters and other vessels. So if we start from the front, we have the front is based basically on a Resurgent from Star Wars. It's the big First Order Star Destroyer. It has a lot of these cross-beam, like, open areas. Now, for the Resurgent, it's big enough that you can fly fighters through, but I didn't want to tempt fate with Space Engineers. I'd have to make this ship even more gargantuan, and this thing's already a kilometer long and stressing my computer to the breakpoint. So we instead put missile turrets. Not missile turrets, missile launchers. So these are Hyperion missile tubes, and they can carry nuclear missiles as well as a variety of other munitions. Then sweeping across the side, here's the quasar cannon. We have a 480 and a 600mm cannon. We have some Vulcan Gatlings, smart guns, Oculuses, interceptor rockets. And then we come to the first set of the longbow tubes, and there's more scattered around on these cutouts. So there's another one right here, there's 2 more on the other end, and then there's a large section here on at the top and bottom of the hangar with more of these longbows. We've got more Hyperions on each of the winglets, and we have some more Hyperions situated in this sort of frontal spine structure. And here's the first 3 of the long swords, and 6 more, so it comes up to 9 per broadside, and 36 spread out over the entire ship. Now, I did a bit of greebling here and there. I'm not a huge fan of this particular section, but it works. I'm more of a fan of the main section and this side section. So then we have these little winglets, which are inspired by the Victory class Star Destroyer from Star Wars, specifically the Victory 1, which has these big flaps that open up, which are just filled with missiles. So I kind of just ripped that idea off, shrunk it, and flared it out more. So this way we could get more forward-facing tubes, and then I condensed the length of it for greater width. Then we have the bridge, and I put antenna towers basically everywhere because this is intended to be a command ship. And we get to the hangar, not the hangar bay, the engine bays, and the engine bays are enormous. But towards the rear here, we've got, looks like 9 engines stacked from top to bottom. And I did something which I thought was kind of clever with this void space, where I could put more horizontal thrust in the rear of the ship. As well as I wanted to make it a little bit more distinguished in its hull form, which is why I had the winglets, the extended prow, and then the rear. I want to say, I guess it'd also be rear wings. We've got an enormous battery here, and there's 4, one on each side, and top and bottom. 333 flechette launchers. We've got the rear-facing 480mm cannons, which can shoot directly rear, as well as broadside. They can't shoot very far forward well. They can shoot maybe 30 degrees in a forward sweep. And then I think it's time that we go inside. So there's 3 main entrances. There's the bridge entrance here. There's the main hangar, and then there's the bottom hangar at the rear, which is basically just the bridge section but upside down with a cutout, which we'll get to shortly. I lost control. Let me move over. Yeah, you can see in the top right that the Scene 2 complex, this is a 6-part ship with 6 subgrids held together by connectors. I have fully tested it, so it does work. It's just very laggy, as I've already stated. So we have the Imperial-style command pit here. This is 3 layers of heavy armor protecting everything. And then forward we have the observation room, so I'll head over here. And this doorway is an armored bulkhead, which is again 3 layers of armor, which we'll pass through. I just like the light armor as more of a facade or exterior block. I don't like the way that the heavy armor looks. We'll pass through the heavy armor bulkhead to the observation deck, and then I also put a command seat here. So this is separated from the rest of the bridge because of the weak windows. I felt like this was a structural weakness that could be exploited, so I put the bulkhead in behind it, as well as I put these hangar doors, which act as blast doors, which will close if I hit a button. This is called lockdown. It's right there. I'll hit it in a little bit. So this provides you with a decent view over most of the guns. The view forward is a little obstructed by this turret, but I think it's fine. So why don't I demonstrate the lockdown with all of these doors closing. And then I'll show you the rest of the bridge section, and then we'll go down into the whole of the ship. Now this ship also features no survival system. It's a creative-only ship. If I put full survival systems in it, it would probably break the game, and my computer would explode violently. So when you start going into the heat of battle, and you don't want to risk your valuable personnel inside this room, or otherwise you can just close it up. Versus if you're at the rear of the formation, and you've got screening ships, and you're not taking direct damage, you can open up and have your admiral to have a better view of what the tactical situation is. So there's also several layers of glass which should help protect you from the elements, but really you're relying mostly on the lockdown. So I think it looks pretty neat. It kind of reminds me of a Star Destroyer, which the ship is very largely based off of. Although I based it off of a piece of art that I found online that I then took several different Star Wars ships and stripped off aspects of them and combined into it, just to make something a little bit less of a ripoff. versus the Centurion is more of a direct ripoff of that ship, which I gave credit to the artist for. Going towards the rear of the ship, rear of the bridge, we have the two stairways that lead down into the hull. We've got some programmable blocks that are not used, so anyone who decides to use this ship can program it however they wish, or not. I'm not competent enough to use them. So you have two sort of communications slash conference rooms. It's mirrored, so it's exactly the same. So you got a couple projectors which make up the table, so you could actually have a meeting, a battle strategy, where you have various ships displayed. Although all of my ships are so big that the ship would hang out over each end of the display, so I typically don't use them myself, with also loading the blueprint adds extra lag. Then we have the plotting room, so this would be part of the flag office, where you'd have the admiral back here or in the front while the captain commands the ship. The admiral's leading the fleet. And so this would be where all of the business happens for fleet communications, versus the bridge is more for ship controls. So now to go down the stairs, the gravity in this ship, it covers most of the habitable area. It's a little wonky in some areas. I did my best, but it has to use multiple gravity generators, and so trying to get them fit exactly is a bit of a struggle. So now that we're at the bottom, this actually is this entire corridor and walkway, as well as these rooms that we're going to go into, is directly above the lower hangar. There's a space beneath me, and then that leads to the hangar. So if I had made it survival capable, I could run all of the connectors and stuff underneath my feet here. But I decided not to do that. So for the next stop on the show, we have, I think this is the med bay. Put both the med bays on the right. There's two med bays, two CICs. Then there's a bridge CIC, which is where we've already been. So I didn't know what to do with all of the middle space, but we have these two large sets of cryotubes. And then there's this big open space in the middle. I didn't know what to do with it. So feel free to do whatever you want with it if you decide to grab this ship or not. And then I put the stairways up to the multiple levels, because sure, you could use the jetpack, but I don't think that it's all that interesting if you're flying around inside your ship. Could use a better design at that point. Also, I like the ship to feel as big as it is, so I make all of these corridors standardly 2 blocks tall to give you a little bit of headroom. So this is going to lead to the secondary. Oh, what am I stuck on? Is this where the gravity's wonky? Alright. This is the secondary reactors. There's 2 of these, and a main reactor room towards the rear of the ship. So these are a series of, I think they're 10 times arc reactors. And then I have this little central command area. I didn't put any consoles or anything. You could shove them against the walls at either end. But I don't know. I prefer not to do that and just leave it open. I think it looks cooler and more atmospheric. As well as that's why I have the little roof over the walkway, even though the space extends much further up and below. Honestly, my reactors are like rooms are mostly trying to mimic Alien Isolation's reactor room. In a lot of ways, I find it to be one of the coolest sections of the entire game. And so I am constantly trying to find something that looks as enormous, as powerful, and as just frankly awesome. So this is the access ways. This leads to the lower hangar. And then for the getting down here, because of the way that the ship is, the wall that separates the section of the ship from the next, because the reactor's in a separate section, is like 1 or 2 blocks beyond this wall. So I couldn't exactly fit a very large stairway without also having to extend the section, which I had to cut into the section just because There's too many shapes. I need to go down. Stop getting on the ladder. Let's try to open up this door. So the secondary hangar bay is the smaller of the two. So this leads into I believe this is actually the center. So we have 15 spots to dock. There's 5 on each side, and then there's a connector in the center here. So you could hang ships as well on the, I guess, the ceiling of the hangar and just drop them into combat. And then you can have these other fighters that are in the bays that can then drop out. Now, I have sized these rear hangar bays specifically for my gauntlet size starfighter, which makes it really long and really wide. So you could fit most fighters or bombers in here pretty comfortably. And then going back up, I'll head to the other side and show you the first of the CICs. We also have 2 engineering rooms and a fuel refinery. Get my head out. Right, there's the gravity. So it should be a line. Not seeing it. Or is it right here? I don't know. There's a line that cuts between the several sections. The rear of the ship where we are right now has the most different subsections because the rear of the ship is significantly taller, wider than the front sections, and so I had to cut it up into more pieces. So going down the hallway to the other side, where the med bay was, this will be the first of the CICs. And then we'll head towards the back, which will eventually lead to the reactor room, or the main reactor, which is much larger than the others. So for this CIC, I went for a bit of a command platform and then several command stations for the various systems. So this would be your second command center, and then you'd have the bridge as your primary. Bridge gets knocked out, you have people in here to take over control. And then there's another one further forward, as well as another med bay that's closer to the first main hangar bay, which we'll get to shortly. But first, towards the rear of the ship. Now I have tested this, and while my computer is exploding while I'm overclocking it, it does fully function. It just relies on an enormous amount of gyroscopes and connectors to hold the ship together. But basically, you're dragging, the main section is in control of the gyros, and you're using that section to physically drag the other sections around, which has some problems. This is also serving as an experiment on if I attach a section to another section to the main section, if it would work, and it appears to work just fine. So this is one of the fuel refining rooms. This is the only survival functional room in the ship, because these O2 gens are connected through pipework to these, which are also connected to the fuel bunkers scattered throughout the ship. There's 4 main fuel bunkers, well 5 technically, because the rear one is split into 2. And each of these fuel bunkers are fully armored and cut off from the rest of the ship, as well as the reactors, with the only access being to the reactors. So for the next one, we have, I believe, the storage room, which will be right here. Now, this room is not functional. It's just there for, I guess, role-playing reasons. This is not connected to any of the rest of the ship. It just exists because I had space and I wanted to use it for something. So we have assemblers, cargo containers, refineries, as well as more assemblers. I didn't put any modules around them because it just wasn't worth it. It's not functional anyway. It's aesthetic. And then going down towards the main reactor room, I find the green glow staring down the corridor to be a really fun little set piece. So here's what I was looking for earlier on the other section. This hallway is split off and is the marker line between the two sections, where the rear half of the ship connects on to the command section here. Now the fuel bunkers are actually to the left and to the right of the reactor room, and are fully armored with a little bit of space between. So if they blow up, the reactor room should be fine, and if the reactor room blows up, they should also be fine. So this is the main reactor. I kind of shaped it like a giant sphere, and it's just a series of azimuth and arc reactors in a case. As well as we have these big reactor towers. I've somewhat come inspired by the Nest as well from Resident Evil 2 with the reactor layout, trying to combine the Nest and Alien Isolation's reactor rooms together. So this catwalk just leads fully around the main reactor, as well as we have these reactor towers. And this reactor room is an enormous cube. It's a lot of open space here, and you can kind of appreciate the size of the space sphere. Now, these three reactor rooms power most of the ship. There's some reactors and as well as a fuel bunker in the forward section. And most sections, except for the command section, have their own power and fuel storage. That way, if you disconnect each section, it can still function fully independently. It just won't be able to move because it either doesn't have thrusters or it doesn't have repulsors, which are buried in every section. Because again, only the command section or the section that you have the control seat in is in control of the rest of the ship. The rest of the thrusters won't fire, the gyroscopes won't work, and the repulsors won't work either. So I use repulsors embedded in the command section to move the rest of the ship by physically dragging it around. Which has been one of my several years of experiments on trying to figure out how composite ships would work to build something this enormous. Next up, I have a series of stations that I'm going to have to work on, as well as supercarriers and dreadnoughts. The dreadnoughts I'm going to be afraid of, because armoring this thing was a nightmare. Because the armor on this ship is quite substantial. It gets thicker the more forward or the more centered you get towards the rear, where it gets up to 3.5 layers of heavy armor with an outer layer of light armor as a skin. Now, the other end of this massive hallway where that wall is the main hangar bay, which has a capacity for 32 fighters, with 8 in bays and then 24 in the front, or main area in between. You can fly out the left or the right. If I can finally get to the forward CIC in the mid bay, which should be right here. So this section as well as the command section are both outfitted to be able to physically move and drag the rest of the ship around. And I have fully tested it. It's just very, very laggy, so I haven't been able to test acceleration or agility very well. So this is the main CIC. It's much further away from the bridge and is therefore much more survivable. It's also buried behind armor that's separate from the hangar, which the hangar's armor is substantial but much thinner. And then we have the other med bay. So this way, if you were to die in, say, your dogfight, you could spawn in here and go grab another fighter. And this should be exactly the same as the other med bay. Again, lots of open space in the middle. I got nothing to do with it, so I just left it empty, but you can do whatever you want to do with it. And finally, onto the main hangar. Now, for the main hangar, we have the 8 bays. So there's 4 on that side, and then it's mirrored 4 over here. I left the center section empty so that I could put stuff behind that wall. I'm pretty sure it's reactors over there for this section of the ship. So this is quite expansive. And there's doors on either end, which I've rigged where you just close both doors at the same time. As well as each of these bays has its own independent doors, so you could close each bay independently and just leave whatever fighters in there locked down. Or you could open them up. I decided to leave them all open because it's easier to traverse and to see around. And I just did these leaving lights, these exit guide lights. They'll go on. So they go on in sequence, just leading towards the edge, which is a lighting trick I learned from Thrawn's Revenge, which they do with their hangars on their ships. And I was like, that's a neat idea, so I'm gonna do that myself. A lot of my ideas are not original, I just copy them and then apply several of them at once, and I get something weird like this. Now, this fighter, this hangar bay is sized for much smaller fighters, but you can fit a lot more of them. The rear bays are sized for much larger fighters, but you can fit fewer. So you could split them 15 bombers and then 32 fighters, or you can put some of the larger ships in the bays. I put this hangar around the Mark 11, which originally was a heavy fighter bomber, but as I've worked with my fighter ships, they ended up getting much larger than this. So this is more of a mid-sized fighter at this point. So if I were to get in this and pilot it, rotate, I use adjustable thruster multipliers on everything because due to the sheer weight of the armor on everything I build, it's just too much weight. But this ship should fit very comfortably in this hangar. And I'll put it in one of the bays on the left. I'll go down a little bit. And then I've sized each of these landing pads to have a little bit of distance between them so you can walk between the ships and you don't have them just like smashing into each other when you're trying to land. That door's actually closed. They started closed, and I guess I just never opened it. I got too much momentum. What's my speed? 14 meters per second? That's kind of slow. But I need to probably boost the engine power on this in order to get it to move. I built this ship with a lot of heavy armor on its own, so I have to boost the thruster ratio in order for this thing to move comfortably. I think I designed it for 3 or 5 times not reactor engine power. I'm going to try and nose this, well, back it up into the hangar. Let me try and do this in reverse. Actually might be too difficult, but whatever. Point being, you can actually reasonably fit this in here. If I were to, let's see if I can just paste it. So, you got a little space between it and everything else, and then you can close the door and land it. So, again, you can fit 32 of them in here, and then 15 more or larger ships in the bottom of your hangar bay. And that should be it for this ship, the Atlas. me see if I can